Hey, y'all, welcome to The Road You Leave Behind here on Outsider. I'm your host, Marty Smith, and we have an absolutely fantastic show for you guys this time around. Our guest is John Rich. Many of you know him from the band Big and Rich, but he's had an unbelievable path, not only in country music, but in reality TV. And we walk through that entire path, what it was like growing up in Amarillo, Texas, the son of a preacher, and how that shapes you. Moving to Tennessee in high school, much to his chagrin, and how that shapes you. What it's like to be in one mega band, Lonestar, being booted out of that band and starting another band in Big and Rich that turned the entire country music genre and Nashville, Tennessee on its ear. What was it like walking through the apprentice experience every single day on reality television? We get into that as well. And what was it like in the interim between being in Lone Star and Big and Rich, when he had to dig deep and he felt a bit like a failure and he had to find himself again? And the songs that he wrote during that period will blow y'all's mind. We walk through each of those as well in this episode. Truly a fascinating guy. I took way too much of his time. He gave us nearly an hour. And here, without further ado, is that interview with country music star John Rich. John, what's up, dude?
Hey, man, how are you?
Man, you look good, son. Look at that damn setup you got.
Oh, it's a little makeshift background, but it's been working all right.
I think that's what we're all doing in COVID, right? Every one of us is trying to figure out the right makeshift background.
Yeah. We actually just got fancy and ordered a 10x8 actual backdrop that'll cover the whole back wall. But, it's all right. People have gotten used to it, I think.
Yeah, I know. It's I don't know whether I love that or hate that. I don't want people to get used to. I like shaking a man's hand and looking him in the eye and saying hello myself.
I don't mean that part, but being able to do interviews coast to coast in all different kinds of towns and not get on an airplane is a pretty cool thing. That part of it.
Well, I appreciate you giving me time today, brother, very much. I know you're busy, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to learn about your path. I mean, let's just start where it started. Born in Amarillo and raised outside of Nashville in Dixon, Tennessee. When did you move to Tennessee? And what was it like? What was your youth like?
So I've got a interesting ping pong story of growing up. So my mother's a Tennessean, my dad's a Texan. They actually met in college in Tennessee at UT Martin out in West Tennessee.
Okay, sure.
So I was actually born out there. And when I was about 3, so I don't remember it, we moved to Amarillo, Texas. And so I lived in Amarillo till I was almost in high school. And then they wanted to move to Tennessee. So we came back to Tennessee. So I was kind of going ping, pong, ping like that. I was, like a living example of the Alamo, right? I mean, we were Tennessee, man, back and forth. But I, growing up in Texas, if you ask me where I'm from, I'm going from Amarillo, Texas. That's where I grew up and learned how to do what it is that I do. So Tennessee came in high school, and I was not excited about it at all because all my friends were out in Texas, and I didn't want to come to Tennessee. But that's what led to me realizing, holy cow, people make money playing music. What does that mean? I've never heard of any such thing living out in Texas.
How did Amarillo shape you?
Well, people out there, first of all, it's flat as a board. The wind blows about 40 miles an hour. People don't realize that Amarillo is 3,200 feet up in altitude. We call it the high plains. So it's Tornado Alley. It is right in the dead center of what you call Tornado Alley. So I tell people I'm the perfect cliche that I grew up in a double wide trailer in Tornado Alley. Tornadoes love trailers. We all know that. So I think, growing up in a pretty Wild West agricultural cowboy kind of environment, my great uncles growing up around them, guys who fought in World War II, and, they look like John Wayne, legitimately look like John Wayne. I mean, lines in their faces that deep, you could plant corn, and their wrinkles. and face looked like leather because they spent their whole life on horses, or on tractors. So, growing up around that culture, you learn what hard work's all about pretty young.
I grew up on a cattle farm too, but I grew up in Appalachia. So I kind of know that same idea to a degree of you learn really quickly. You have great perspective on what working for a living is. And that's why I'm so grateful every day. I put in a lot of hours, but it ain't working.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. I mean, my grandmother, Granny Rich, she was alive until last summer. So she was almost 89 years old. She grew up out there in Pampa, Texas, outside of Amarillo, right in the middle of the Dust Bowl days. I mean, try that one on. So she got Great Depression, Dust Bowl days, all hitting at the same time. And you're growing up out there. And so, somebody like her, and then here comes World War II. So when you ask Granny Rich, why are you still working 40 hours a week at 88 years old? She'd take a big long draw off of her cigarette, look at you, and say, because I can, and that's what you're supposed to do when you live.
Yes.
Meaning you should be a supplier. You should be an asset. You should bring something to the table no matter what it is. Never is it okay to sit around and not bring something to the table.
Man, I love that, dude. My grandmother, Eunice Martin Smith, my daddy's mom, made it to 98 and a half. She was the second oldest of 13, child of the Great Depression. She worked on our family land till she was 93, and the Commonwealth of Virginia took her driver's license from her. Oh. She was as badass. You talk about that leathered skin with those lines in it deep as the Grand Canyon. Yeah. That was my granny, too. I respect that so much.
Yep. Well, we got the same story there. That's
when did music enter your life, John?
Well, really young, not on a professional level, but just being around it, because my dad's played guitar since he was a teenager, and he actually in college was a vocal major, so he really good singer. But being a preacher, my dad's started preaching when he was about 19, 20 years old. So part of his arsenal when he would preach would be to throw a guitar around his neck and go, "Let me sing a few songs," right? So he could sing,
awesome,
do it all, which made for a pretty potent pastor who could do that. So, one of his extra jobs that he took on was teaching guitar lessons. He did everything from, he was slopping hogs. He was a night watchman at Amarillo National Bank. He was working on a car lot, mowing people's grass, detailing people's cars, giving guitar lessons, and still visiting people in the hospital and preaching on the weekends. I mean, so, he's pulling 100-hour weeks, but playing that guitar, I'm like, man, that's cool. And one day when I was about 5 or 6, he said, "You want to tag along with me to the music store? I'm going to give some guitar lessons." I was like, "Yeah, sure, of course." So I tagged along with him, and he hands me this little, well, I'll show it to you. It's right here. Hang on a minute. He hands me this guitar. You see the year on that?
1979?
Yeah.
I love it.
The guitar he handed me when I was 5. I was 5 years old. And he said, "Yeah, just pay attention and sit over here behind everybody." And he was teaching adults how to play. So I'm watching what he's doing and watching what they're doing, and I'm landing these chords. He's like, "That's pretty good." And by the time I was 7, I could play everything pretty much everybody else was playing. And then he wound up giving me his actual guitar that he had since he was 20 years old, because he couldn't afford to buy me a really good guitar. So he gave me his guitar, and I still have that one. That's the one I played all the way till I was in the band Lonestar. So it goes way back in my family. I never thought of it as a career. I just thought of it as something really cool to do with my dad.
How does growing up the son of a preacher shape you? I've heard you discuss World War II a couple of times. My mother's father, James Massey, was the preacher man in George Patton's Third Army, Battle of the Bulge.
Yeah.
And I had the great opportunity to spend 6.5 or so hours back in 2009. I finally grew the balls and wasn't quite as selfish as I was as a younger man to ask him if he minded sharing some of those stories with me. And 6.5 hours later, with tears in his eyes, he went to bed. And it was one of the most indelible, passionate meaningful moments of my life. And, I like to drink and I cuss a little too much. So I screwed up his whole legacy pretty quick. I wondered, how did you evolve as the son of a preacher as you grew into adulthood from those lessons and fundamentals you learned at home into the man you became?
Well, there's all kinds of scripture that talks about, people that do the wrong thing but don't know any better will be punished. But people that know better and do it anyway, they get it 10 times as bad because you knew better, right? So I was taught growing up, I knew what it said. I knew what you're supposed to do and what you're never supposed to do, especially, and I don't mean just like, this decision or that decision, but your basic attitude in life, what it's supposed to be. You're not just supposed to be an egotistical maniac who brutalizes other people with your success every chance you get and stuff like that. So I had grown up with a lot of failures, pretty lean. A lot of people tell me, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. That ain't going to happen. You're stupid. You're not going to college. You're going to do this instead. What are you doing? You're throwing your life away. And so when I finally got success, man, I turned around and used that success like a baseball bat and just went, oh yeah, check this out. Wham, wham. And I spent 10 or 12, 15 years just whacking people around. And I started having lots of success, right? So, but over time, what you realize is, man, you tore up a lot of stuff back through then and, really went against what you knew was true. And because you did that, now you got to pay penalties on a lot of different levels, and so I would say prodigal son would probably define me to a certain degree. I wasn't totally prodigal because I was still taking care of my family members. I bought a house from my grandparents' first check I ever got. I still was taking care of family and doing the right things. But I think my personal attitude was absolutely terrible and out of whack that entire stretch of time. So, the good thing about learning that stuff young and it goes way down deep is, if God's patient enough with you to let you live through being a jerk for a long enough period of time, you can get on the other side of that, man. Wow, you sure learned a lot, right? You knew it in the beginning. Now you know where you didn't do it right. And now you got more time to go do it the right way with all this experience behind you now. So that's kind of where I am today. So I get to pass that along to a lot of people. I think admitting that you didn't do things the right way, admitting that you went against your race and against what you knew to be true is important for people to be able to admit that. Everybody's got those stories, but you got to be willing to admit it, own up to it, and stop doing that. Stop it. That's what it means to repent. It means not just say, I'm sorry, say, I'm sorry, and I'm going to stop doing that to the best of your ability. We're not perfect. We're never going to do it all perfect, but I think you get my point. So it's been quite an interesting relationship with my dad because many years he was not real proud of the way I was acting. He was seeing the success and going, man, that's incredible what he's pulling off. But God, I wish he'd reel it in, And now finally that I have, I've got a wife, two little boys, 9 and 11. My dad's around. I see him all the time. It's a pretty good spot to be in today.
One of the first steps to atonement is vulnerability, brother. And vulnerability is a very difficult place to get to because if it is vulnerable, then whatever energy you put out into the world, you have to be okay with what comes back to you because it's genuine, right? And that's a scary thing. And I appreciate your honesty right there because we're all flawed. Ain't nobody perfect. We all got things we want back. I most certainly do. I talk about it all the time, wrote a whole book about it. Mm-hmm. And I'm grateful for your honesty there. John, I love the idea of growing up through fame. What comes with fame that if you never experience it, you can't imagine?
It's probably different for different people. I mean, for me, it was, I felt like everything that I had not been able to ever get access to, get my hands on, whether it be, I want to meet this person, I want to go to this place, I want to buy that car, I want to be able to whatever, all that just comes whammo all at the same time. And, if you're not married, if you're a single guy rolling through your 20s, early 30s, and it's just steamrolling out here, excess is your biggest enemy, is living in excess because you're young. Like you can recover pretty quick from a late night out. So you're totally fine. But there's things that you said the night before that you're a little foggy on exactly what you said and how they took it. And you find out years later, oh yeah, you don't even remember what exactly you said, man. I'll never forget it. It was the worst thing anybody said to me. And you look at me and go, I got in a fist fight last night with somebody, or I did this stupid thing or that stupid thing. That's because of excess. And it's interesting in country music. We always talk about live your music, right? You want to live, your music is synonymous with you as an artist. Well, unfortunately, that's true at certain times. I mean, when Johnny Cash was doing it, and he was writing about shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. He didn't really shoot a man in Reno, but he was thinking about it. He had the attitude of, I'd shoot you just to watch you die, son. I mean, mean as a rattlesnake, right? And whacked out on everything you can get your hands on, and Cocaine Blues and all these crazy songs. Yeah, and it almost killed Johnny Cash. So it's an interesting paradigm that rolls through, especially country music, that if you're writing hardcore subjects and talking about excessive living and, all these crazy things you're singing about, can you really write those songs if you're not actually living those songs at the time? The answer is probably no. You probably can't write them. So the whole trick is, okay, how far down into it are you actually going to get? Are you going to be able to pull yourself out of it and not go over the edge with those kind of subjects? Because that's really where you're at that moment in your life. It's a dangerous spot to be in, and a lot of artists never fully recover from that. I'm lucky that I was able to get way out there on the edge and have some good people around me said, okay, time for you to come on back to reality, buddy. And the main one being the boss, yanking my chain hard enough a few times where I said, okay, I'm done, and then come back. But isn't that a crazy thing to think about, that if you're going to write certain subjects in music in a career like Waylon was doing and Johnny Cash and some of these guys, they were writing from experience. Well, hell, if that's your experience, then you've had some serious experiences out there that most people never have had. So fame and success and where your art mingles with how you're living and all the way that comes out, it's all one big pot of stuff.
It's amazing how resonant it is, though. Those types of songs and sad songs, and we'll get into your amazing songwriting ability in a few minutes. What separates country music, though, John? What are the attributes that separate country from everything else?
Well, I've always said great country music and great rap have something in common. Not musically, but they have this in common: authenticity. So a lot of your hardcore rappers, when Ice Cube and guys like that were coming out, and the stuff he's talking about is stuff he was looking at on the every day, and he wrote it down and put it on a mic, and it's as real as it's going to get. And then in country music, when you hear us singing about this subject, that subject, if it's really sad, I guarantee you, we were really sad when we wrote that. If it's a song about America, you bet your ass that's how that guy or that girl feels about it. If it's Redneck Woman, Gretchen Wilson, that's her. So I think the authenticity is the thing. I think other genres, you've got great singers who just go sing great songs, and it's not necessarily, you're not getting a window into who they are like you would be in country music. And as weird as that sounds, like you do in especially the early stuff in the rap world, that it's weird how those two things to me creatively and lyrically run parallels to each other.
So true. They're writing what they see and what they experience, and my God, is it raw. Mm-hmm. I just those late 80s, early 90s NWA records, and all the way into Public Enemy and that type of time frame. They were so raw, all the way through Dre and Snoop and all that. But when did Nashville become part of your scope? When did you decide that you wanted to chase the dream?
So moved to Tennessee in high school, and I did not want to be in Tennessee. I wanted to be where I grew up, out in Texas, but here I am in Tennessee. I remember meeting this kid in school, got to be friends with him. I said, "What's your dad do for a living?" He goes, "My dad drives Ricky Skaggs' bus." I looked at him, I said, "Ricky Skaggs rides on a bus?" And I'm thinking school bus. He goes, like a tour bus. I went, he goes, those big fancy buses that, and I'd never seen one. I went, "Oh yeah, I've seen that on TV." He goes, "Yeah, my dad drives that bus." I said, "So your dad knows Ricky Skaggs?" because I'd been buying Ricky Skaggs stuff at the Walmart in Amarillo with my, hog slopping money or whatever, lawn mowing money. He goes, my dad's driven him for 10 years. He goes, he comes over to our house at Christmas. Like we're friends. And it just blew my mind. I went, holy cow, all these people I've grown up listening to and idolizing their music and talent, they all live down the road from here, not very far. So that got me thinking, oh, man, it sure would be cool to meet one of those guys at some point. And another friend of mine in high school goes, I would sing at school and, trying to meet girls and all that and singing around with the guys. And one kid goes, you ought to audition for Opryland. Look, they're having auditions right here. It's in the Tennessean. You should go audition. I'd been to Opryland a bunch of times. When we'd come in from Texas, we'd always go to Opryland. I said, oh, I ain't got a shot at Opryland, man. You got to know how to dance and do all this stuff. I said, I can't do that. He goes, well, just go down there. He says, it's probably going to be a bunch of good looking girls. I said, well, that's true. He goes,
sign me up.
Yeah, let's go. Let's try it. So I drove my 1971 Dodge Dart Swinger, which I still have, down to Briley Parkway, went in the A-Cuff Theater and auditioned. I sang Clint Black's Put Yourself in My Shoes, which was the big hit that was out right then. That's a hard song to sing. So I laid that song out on them, got callbacks. I said, okay. I got callbacks and they said, we want you. I said, I don't dance. They go, can you two-step? I go, not really. They said, we can teach you how to two-step. If you can, you got a job. So that was my first job making money singing. And I knew halfway through my senior year that I had landed that job. So I'm looking at college after Opryland. So I'm going to work Opryland all summer, then I'm going to go to college. So that was my first entry into seeing a check. I think it was $310 a week for 6 days a week work at Opryland. But it was the most awesome money I ever made.
And from there, how did it progress?
Well, on the show I was on called Country Music USA, there were several people on that show that wound up going on and getting record deals, but there was one guy named Dean Sams who had been on the show for a few years. And, we became friends on the show. And he said, hey, I'm putting a little band together to play some, lounges and stuff around town. And some of my buddies from Texas just moved in, we're all from Texas. So, it's kind of be cool to put a band together. Would you want to be in it? And I said, yeah, that sounds great. He goes, you can play bass, right? I said, sure, I can play a bass. It's 4 strings. How hard could it be? I'd picked one up a couple of times, but I wasn't no bass player. He goes, great. And he hands me a cassette with 20 songs that were in the top 40 that week. Said, learn these songs. We're going to be rehearsing on Saturday. I went, okay. So I called a buddy of mine who was a bass player, and I said, you got to show me how to play these songs. So I go to his house, and he goes to him, and I'm playing it with my thumb like this. I don't even play it the right way. I'm playing it like that. And I go walking into rehearsal with what wound up being Lonestar, playing with my thumb.
Crazy.
And I don't even know. I remember asking the drummer, I said, man, when I'm listening to the radio and I hear the bass note, I said, it's got this punch sound with it. I said, what is this? Is it using a pick? Like, what is it? He goes, no, that's the kick drum playing with the bass note. And what the hell? This guy doesn't know anything. That's how little I knew about bands, instrument, how that stuff worked. But they let me stay in the band. They said, you got to get better on the bass, but you can, you got to get better and you can stay. But we love your singing. I could sing higher than Richie. So I could hit high harmonies over Richie. And that's what kept me in the band. That's how that started.
So what was Lonestar's arc? When did you guys sign a record deal? How did that unfold?
We started playing bars in late 90, early 93. And then I believe it was middle of 94, end of 94, we got a record deal. Joe Galante came to Nashville, took over RCA, started a spinoff called B&A, and he signed us and Kenny Chesney.
Chesney, yeah.
Yep.
In that era, I mean, you guys had some great songs. No News, Tequila. Everybody loves Tequila Talking. And didn't you write Come Crying to Me? You wrote it.
Yeah, that was my first number one that I ever wrote. Yep.
It's an amazing song. So what and you guys exploded. So what was that time frame like for you guys?
It was you went from a van to a bus. That was like, we made it. We have a bus. I can't even believe I can lay down fully at night and go. Incredible. They were all, Richie's 13 years older than me. Dean and the guys were like 10 years older than me. So it was like big brothers. And I'm like the junior member, just kind of somehow managed to worm my way in to this band. But that's where when you got a record deal, you also got a complimentary publishing deal along with it. So I took my $20,000 a year complimentary publishing deal and took full advantage of that. And by that, I mean, I went to Don Cook, who was producing our record, who was producing everybody's records at that point. Brooks and Dunn, the Mavericks, Joe Diffie, Wade Hayes, Alabama, on and on and on. He's producing everybody. Don, he said, "Hey man, if you ever want me to hook you up with some writers here, we need to write for your new record." I said, "Hook me up." So he starts hooking me up with songwriting appointments, and I just instinctively would walk in with 20 or 30 or 40 half-written songs already in a notebook, which I didn't know what a big deal that was to the big time guys. But that was a huge deal. When you sit down with Paul Boone, Larry Boone and Paul Nelson and Chick Raines and Mark D. Sanders and Sharon Vaughn and all those kinds of people, and you have all these half-written songs, what I've learned since then, and I tell this to young writers all the time, they go, "Well, thank God I don't have to burn one of my good ideas with this brand new guy who doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Let's write one of his ideas." Right? And so it's respect to the bigger songwriter that you didn't say, "I don't know, what are your ideas?" Don't ever say that to somebody that outranks you like that. You bring the ideas. If they hate all of your ideas, then okay, maybe we'll write one of theirs. But I started doing that, man, and that led into the next 3 or 4 years of me writing 200, 250 songs a year, which is where I really started to razor sharpen my ability to write songs.
What were some of those? Do you remember when you first got in the room with those guys? What were some of those ideas that came to fruition?
"Come Crying to Me" was one of them. That was sitting with Wally Wilson, and I think I have to look back. Maybe it was Paul Nelson, one of those guys. I had that. No, it was Mark Sanders. That's who it was. It was Wally and Mark Sanders. And I had "Come Crying to Me," like, don't go crying to somebody else, come crying to me. And Mark goes, "That's a really good spin on the word." And then Mark had that drony B chord thing that he was writing all these Jody Messina hits and all these big hits he was writing. And so he lays into his thing, and I go, "What is that chord you're playing?" He goes, "Oh, that's a B." I go, "You play songs in B?" Because the only thing I ever knew was a B9, with all 4 fingers, and it's just a chord you use when you're playing a Johnny Cash song. I'm like, I've never seen a B like that. So Mark teaches me how to pull them down and make a B, and basically you just create 1s and 5s all the way down. There's never a 3, and just makes this ring kind of drone sound. So I picked that up from him, and we write this song. And even today, every time I pick up a guitar and I throw that beat on, I go, "Thanks, Mark." It was just a massive, I've always been one of those guys, like, you throw me into a situation that I want to succeed at it, but I don't know anything about it. Man, there's virtually no limit that would stop me from learning, digging, and going home and doing whatever I got to do to stay in that situation. Just because you don't have it all figured out at the front end doesn't mean anything. effort and sincerity and passion can pull a lot of people through it.
I say it every day, John. Kindness, effort, passion. We control. Those are us. There's a lot of uncontrollables out there in the world that we face every day, but those 3 things, that's us. We look in the mirror and decide every day, do you want it bad enough? Are you kind enough? And is your energy positive enough? That's you.
Hustle beats talent.
Damn right. I love it.
I think extraordinarily talented people are almost at a disadvantage to some degree because they're so good, so talented, naturally gifted at whatever it is they're doing that they've never had to work really hard to accomplish whatever it was they were trying to accomplish until they get to the big game. And then they get to the big game, and if you don't work hard, you're not going to make it. And here comes this other guy or gal who can't sing half as good as they can, going out here and selling out stadiums. And why is that? Because they out hustled them, because hustle beats talent On the big game, it does.
I love that, man. You all those artists and bands and acts you just mentioned that Don Cook was producing. It's insane. That era, I believe that era of country music. It's my favorite era. It's the soundtrack of my youth. You and I are about the same age. What was it like to live through that era of country music with the Tritts and the Garth Brooks, and you mentioned Clint Black and Brooks and Dunn, Alabama, on and on. I mean, just like stupid.
Yeah. It was, I mean, just wide open. You know, this was prior to social media, prior to everybody having a cell phone, prior to all that stuff. So, I mean, it was just as rock and roll wide open as you're going to get. And just the energy is insane. I mean, at that era, when Don Cook is down there at Sony Tree back in the day, and you look around, and in that writer's room is Joe Diffie, and in that writer's room is Randy O, and then over there's Kix and Ronnie, and I'm sitting over here with Don Cook and Chick Raines or whoever, and I'm going, how did I get in this room, man? And this is insane. And so that's what I say. I took my complimentary publishing deal at $20,000 a year and took full advantage of it, because the money meant nothing. That's not enough money to really change anything. But the access of what that was the golden key, man, through the door. And people get those keys and they better turn the door. I've said this before. God only opens doors for people who have enough balls to run through them. You got to be willing to run through the door. He ain't going to open it. And I just think that's my attitude. When you go back and look at my dad or my grandparents or any of those people, that's how they always came at it. They're like, just open the door and let me run through it. And so I've approached my whole career like that.
I love it. It's funny. I interviewed for my ESPN podcast the founder of Folds of Honor, a friend of yours. Yep. And he has a saying, go before you're ready. And that is how he and his brothers have operated in the military as fighter pilots their entire careers. I love that. Go before you're ready.
Yep.
So what was it that inspired or led you to leave Lonestar? Why was that the right choice for you?
Funny way to ask that question. I love that. Nothing inspired me to leave. The better question would be, what inspired them to fire me?
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that that's how it went. So how did it go down?
No, I still think that the press clippings never show that that's what actually happened. They'll say it now. If you interview them, they'll say, yeah, we fired him. What happened is I wanted to write songs like Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy, and they wanted to write songs like Mr. Mom. Mm-hmm. Just two totally different lifestyles going on right here. And you know, I was just a pretty knot-headed kid from Texas who starting to make some money and starting on that road of, hey, man, you don't get to tell me what to do anymore. And they just had enough of it. So they fired me. And 9 months later, I'm sitting at home in my little apartment watching the CMA Awards. And the year before that, I'd been at the CMA Awards with them. Now I'm watching the CMA Awards, watching them step on stage and sing Amazed, one of the biggest country songs ever, and watching the whole place standing ovation, awards. And I'm looking at that going, well, they made the right decision getting rid of me. And I'm sitting there with nothing going on. I mean, you want to talk about a gut punch. That was a big one. And that's honestly one of the triggers I think that hit me, that pissed me off so bad and angered me, that not understanding they needed to fire me. I did not belong there. You know, they needed to get rid of me, but I looked at it as they kicked me out of the band. They're going to go have all this success and I'm a joke and whatever. That's one of the things that kicked me into that real pissed off mode that I stayed in for several years after that. But, you know, looking back on it now, I go, well, hell, they let you be in the band when you shouldn't have been there anyway. So it's their right to send you home anytime they want to. That's the real answer. But it took me a while to come around to that.
How did they deliver the message? What did they call you? Did they bring you in? What happened?
It was the day after my birthday, January 8th. My birthday is January 7th. And we played a New Year's Eve show in Kennesaw, Georgia at Cowboys, this gigantic bar down there. That was my last show. I did not know that was my last show. They knew. And on January 8th, they said, hey, we need to have a business meeting at our manager's office. I'm like, a business meeting right now? What? Okay. So I showed up at the business meeting right on time, and they had already all been there for an hour, and there's everybody standing there. And Richie and Dean said, "Hey, we think it's time for you to leave the band." And I went, "What do you mean leave it?" And they go, "You have to leave the band." They said, "You need to, go onto the bus, go get your stuff. You got a couple of days because the bus is leaving." I said, "So I'm not on these next shows?" "No." I said, "So New Year's Eve was my last show?" "Yep." I said, "Why didn't anybody tell me that was my last show?" "Well, we thought maybe you wouldn't show up if we told you that." I said, "Yeah, maybe I wouldn't have." And so it was like that, and
That's hard.
20, 24, 25. I mean, parking lot, fist fighting mad.
How long did it take for you you still may not accept it right now, but how long did it take for you to be able to rationalize or quantify that it was the right thing for your path?
Well, right after that, Joe Galani, he calls me and he goes, "Well, I heard the guys booted you out of the band." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, I'd like to offer you a solo deal." I said, "Is that right?" He goes, "Yep." I said, "Well, let's go." And I said, "Well, I'm going to show them." So I go in and I go cut a solo record, put out 2 singles. Neither one of them did anything. And then Joe drops me from my deal. So now I'm a 2-time loser, got kicked out of a band who's now hotter than a match. I put out a solo deal. It didn't do anything. I lost that deal. What's left? And I'm going, nothing. There's nothing left. So that's when I went into, what's the one thing I can still control? I cannot control if radio's going to play me. I couldn't control the band keeping me. Can't control the record label. Pencil, piece of paper. That's all I've got. As long as I got a pencil and a piece of paper, I'm still in the game. Now, I lost my publishing deal too, because when you lose your record deal, you also lose your publishing deal. That's the complimentary part that it just goes away. So, man, through that next 4 to 5 years, that's when I met Big Kenny, Gretchen Wilson, reached back out to Cowboy Troy, who I'd met in the Lonestar days. That's when Music Mafia started happening. And I'm sitting there writing songs with people you've never heard of before who wound up being big time successes. So that's off the road and not in the grinder. I'm just roaming around Nashville. Can you imagine a guy like me just roaming around Nashville for 4 or 5 years after being in Lonestar? So that gave me some access into some places because I'd been in a multi-platinum band and I'd written a couple of hits. So that next few years, man, that's where the songwriting became the rock bottom foundational place that I realized there's no guarantee anybody's ever going to want to hear me sing anything. But if I can write songs that people want to cut, I'm in the ballgame for a long, long time. That's when I got really serious about that.
And some of those songs that came out of your soul during that period are iconic and forever songs. If you would share, there's going to be people listening who don't know that era for you. Rattle them off for us.
Well, it's a bunch. In the course of a few years there, I had over 230 songs recorded. So it was Redneck Woman, Here for the Party, All Jacked Up, When I Think About Cheating, Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy, Coming to Your City, Hicktown, Amarillo Sky, Johnny Cash, Mississippi Girl, Like We Never Loved at All, Picking Wildflowers. I mean, I don't know. That's off the top of my head. It's a list. It's like a tie, dude. It's a long tie. So I was writing all those songs when nobody gave a rat's ass what I was doing. Nobody cared what I was doing because I'd already proven to everybody that I was worthless in these other arenas as far as they were concerned. I had to reinvent myself as a songwriter and come at them from a spot that couldn't be denied, meaning, doesn't mean they're going to cut it, but they hear that song go, that's a really strong piece of music right there. Did you write that? I go, yeah. Who'd you write it with? This guy named Big Kenny. They go, who the hell's that? I go, exactly. But it's a great song, right? And that started the build back process for me in the music industry of people realizing I was not gone and I was bringing something that meant something.
I mean, you're talking about absolute monsters. Everybody knows Redneck Woman. That thing probably bought you houses for all I know. I mean, it was a record-breaking song. Yeah. And Amarillo Sky, for me, is a top 5 or 10 ever. I mean, ever. And Aldean's version of it is just like, Jason's had a phenomenal career. To me, that's the greatest track he's ever cut, for me, as a fan. So It's just, and why? You wrote why? Like, why? God almighty. I mean, you helped old Jason out, but
He too. Yes,
he helped you.
yeah. Yeah. So that was, I mean, when you wind up down in the gully and things are out of your control, you have to figure out what's still in your control. That could be what you're eating. It could be how you're exercising. It could be whatever, something simple, and try to control it and control it well and have some forward momentum and incrementally pull yourself back up into a spot where you got momentum again, right? That's not only this business, that's every business. That's any career for anybody. They're all going to experience that. This country does not guarantee us happiness. It guarantees us the right to pursue happiness. And the fact that we're allowed to pursue it should inherently make us happy, because there's billions of people that woke up this very day with talent and drive and passion and intellect and everything they need to make it. But because of where they live, they're not allowed to pursue happiness. They're not allowed to exhaust their potential, but we are. So anybody in this country that belly aches about, well, I just can't seem to get ahead and blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? It's hard for anybody to really go do big things. At least you've got the right to go for it. I remind people of that all the time. And I've had to remind myself of it too. But looking back throughout these years we're talking about, that was my attitude. Like, well, I'm down, but I ain't out, because I'm still an American and I still got a pencil and a piece of paper and this old Gibson. Let's see what's left. And that has pulled me out of the ditch more times than I can count.
I love it, man. That's such a great message. We're blessed to be able to walk out the front door every day and go and do and be and aspire to be whatever we want. So you and Big Kenny, so y'all form a union and turn Nashville on its ear. Fair?
I would say it played out. Yeah.
How did y'all happen? How did that happen?
A girl named Cindy Simmons, who was working for Fender Guitars as the artist rep. So she would see an artist, an up and comer, or somebody she thought was good and could give them a guitar and to rep, to play a Fender. And so she knew Kenny and she knew me. We didn't know each other. And she had told both of us, hey, Kenny, this guy, John Rich, from Lonestar. And he's like, yeah. He goes, you should meet this guy. He's like, okay, yeah, maybe I'll meet him one day. And then she's telling me this guy, Big Kenny. I'm like, big what? Big and fat, big and tall, big and loud. Why do they call him big? She goes, you'll understand when you meet him. Just trust me. You'll understand. I said, okay. Well, she invites me to come see a Big Kenny show at Douglas Corner. God rest its soul. I wish it was still here. At Douglas Corner in about 2099. No, it was 99. It was 99. Not long after Lonestar. And I go down there and see Kenny's show and I went, I don't know what this is, but that's extremely creative. And I don't really know what to call that. I don't know if that's rock or folk or country. I don't know what that is. It's like psychedelic country rock, crazy stuff. I don't know what it is, but the creative side of me went, but that's impressive what he's doing up there. And so when it was over, she introduced us to each other. And a couple of days later, we said, all right, let's get together and write a song. And we wrote a song in like 30 minutes. And we listened back to the work tape of the song. And Kenny goes, are you singing lead on that? I said, I thought you were singing lead. He goes, well, I thought you were singing lead. And we listened to it again. And we found out Kenny's voice is down here and my voice is up here. We were singing counter melodies to each other, moving like this, that sounded like that were harmonizing, but were two separate melodies. And we went, what is that? What? Okay, well, let's write another song. We write another song. Same thing happens again. We're like, we don't even know what it is. Even to this day, if you ask, how do you guys go after your vocals? We would say, I have no earthly idea. Don't know. We don't know. And so that is what led into, he had tried a rock deal. It didn't work. I got kicked out of the band, solo deal. It didn't work. We're like, man, let's just go somewhere and play music with some other people and have some fun. And we knew some rappers and some blues guys, and we knew some bluegrass guys. And we know this bartender down in Nashville named Gretchen who screams in the microphone. And that's when we decided, well, let's just put our own jam together. We realized that Nashville was saying in the bar scene, all the R&B singers sing in this bar, all the country singers sing in that bar. This is where the rock bands go, and down here's where the bluegrass guys are at, and that's where you guys play. We go, yeah, but we all want to play together. And they'd say, yeah, but there's not a bar. We'd go to a bar and they go, yeah, well, we don't put everybody together because the crowd comes to hear this, or the other thing. We're like, well, we don't want to do that. And they went, well, we said, well, there's nowhere to play, so we'll just go find the dumpiest place we can find, and we'll just play anyway. It's called the Pub of Love, which held about 50 people. And we decided to call it the Music Mafia, M-U-Z-I-K, M-A-F-I-A, Musically Artistic Friends in Alliance. We come up with this little phrase. And here's James Otto and Shannon Lawson and all these insanely talented people, Angie Aparo, just mind-boggling singers. And we start our own jam, and that began the process of Nashville understanding that genres were crossing over each other, that the fan bases were crossing over each other. You got to remember the internet just showed up. So now we can hear music by going click, click, click. And that was happening. You're being exposed to all kinds of music that you were not hearing like that. And it started to really get into the way you were writing, get in the way you're singing, get in the way you're interacting. You want to go see other acts you've never heard about before because they're on the internet. They're on MySpace at that point. Music Mafia was a representation of what was happening in real time with the fan base and with the creative community of Nashville. And the industry had absolutely no idea that that was going on. And that's why they thought what we were doing was just total bullshit. That's what they thought. They're like, a bunch of yahoos down here. No, I don't think so. I think what we're doing is putting our finger on the pulse of what's happening in real time. We're ahead of you guys. And when Big and Rich came on the scene, most of the industry did not like it. Most of country radio didn't like it. But Kenny and I, our attitude was, well, at least we'll like it. Nobody's telling us what to do. At least we'll like it. I know Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy. They say that'll never get played and it's the stupidest song ever written or whatever. I go, yeah, but when we sing it at Music Mafia, all the girls go absolutely bananas. So why wouldn't they go bananas all over the U.S. if we played that song? Well, they probably would, but radio's never going to play it. So what? So we had to take on that attitude and actually be artists. You know what I mean? Where you just cut your line and the chips fall where they're going to fall. That's how that played.
So that leads me to another thing that intrigues me so much about that town. Being an artist. How many people end up being successful being the artist they want to be?
Well, that's an interesting way to phrase it. There's artists and there's singers. So singers, some of them, the way they sing is art. Okay, so I don't want to take that away, but let's talk about, art. In my mind, when you say what is art, I would say something that cannot be duplicated. There's no such thing as two exact paintings. No such thing as, I would call a sunset art, God's art, right? There's no such thing as two of those. Never been the same. We all have our own fingerprints. So artists, to me, they do it in such a way that that's the only way it's ever been done. And you're never really going to ever totally duplicate that again, because that person was very individualized and they said it like Willie Nelson. Ain't gonna be another one of those, right? That's an artist. And I've said that, that the music industry moves like a sidewinder snake, back and forth. It follows trends and fads and culture and all that. It chases what the culture's doing. And singers generally just chase the tail of that snake. Wherever it goes, whoop, here they come, whoop, there they go again. Artists go like that. They just got a straight line. And that snake, that industry, it's moving. And as it moves across them, the phone's ringing, they're having hits. Oh, it's out here on the edge. Phone ain't ringing. They're not that popular. Oh, here, that few years later. Oh, here they come again. Oh, here we go again. Back and forth and back and forth. But that artist never stops doing what that artist does because that's what they do. And so the artist, the true artist, has to be willing to do what's inside of them, whether it's popular at the time or not. To me, that's where the real rubber meets the road with the real artists out there, is the ones that will not chase the tail of the snake. They just say it like they want to say it. They don't let the industry dictate to them what's going to happen. They dictate to the industry what's going to happen. That's what me and Kenny did. Industry said, that is not going to work. We went, well, we're doing it anyway. So if this is our last yeehaw, make sure we got a good bar tab set up because we're going to have some fun and take a bunch of pictures. But this is how we're going to do it. And so we did it. And guess what? The fans decided who was going to be the winner. And they picked Big and Rich. They said, we like Big and Rich. We want more of Big and Rich. And the industry had to adapt to us instead of the other way around. Huge lesson. I've had lots of singers come to us at concerts, different places, and say, when I heard the first Big and Rich record, that's when I moved to Nashville, because I thought, man, if they'll let those guys do something that creative, maybe the stuff that's in my head could actually have a chance, which is the greatest compliment you're ever going to get from another artist.
It sure is. A couple more. I've already kept you too long, brother. I appreciate your time. As a guy who is on College Game Day, obviously we love it. How did that happen? How did you guys end up with the theme song for College Game Day?
The World Series of Poker comes out, I think it was around 2004 is when that first started airing. And they used Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy and that. And so we got this little conversation going. And not long after that, we cut the Coming to Your City album. And we had some connections now going on in TV a little bit. And ESPN calls us and says, hey, we're doing this new thing where we're going to go to a different city every week and highlight these teams and immerse ourselves in that town. Your song Coming to Your City is perfect for that. Would you guys want to do that? I said, hell yeah, I love college football. And so we did it. And it has now been the theme. I think we just re-upped it again. It's I think coming up on 17 years, it's going to be that Coming to Your City. College Game Day has been a thing. And it's been so cool because people that never listen to country music walk up to us in airports and go, I know you guys from Saturday mornings. It's just wild to think that song is stuck in there that long. And just another example, man, keep that pencil moving. You never know when a song might stick with you.
Well, we love it. Everybody at ESPN does. It's certainly part of our fabric too. So my wife is a reality TV fanatic. Okay. So we watch you on The Apprentice, of course. What fascinates me about The Celebrity Apprentice with you is this: Meatloaf, Lil Jon, Gary Busey, Jose Canseco, John Rich. What in the Sam hell was that experience like?
Well, first of all, Gary Busey is the nicest bunch of guys I've ever met. There's 3 or 4 Garys, okay? And they're a nice bunch of guys. Meatloaf actually now lives in Nashville, and that's a whole other thing with Meatloaf. But I did not want to do the show. They had called me twice before for me to do the show. I was a fan of the show. I said, I don't know what they're doing to the people on that show, but they act like lunatics on this show. I said, I don't know what they're doing, but I think I want to stay out of that. So I did. Well, the third time it comes around again, and this time they fly to Nashville, and they say, we want you to be on the show. I said, okay, I'm going to play for St. Jude. I said, what's the most money's ever been raised on the show? They said, Piers Morgan raised $550,000. I said, well, I can't let a Brit have the number 1 spot, man. That we got to compete. So I said, I'm gonna see if I can raise $1 million for St. Jude Children's Hospital, which is something I've been supporting from the Lonestar days. I said, okay, let's go. And I just kept in my mind that, hey, keep your stuff together because you're representing the greatest children's hospital on the planet, and don't embarrass these people. And remember, kids, that's who you're playing for. So I just kept that front and center. And when all the crazy stuff would go on, man, there were things I wanted to say and just didn't say them, and just kept going. By the time it was done, I'd raised $1.4 million and won the whole thing.
I just think that's phenomenal. What they do there at St. Jude is the Lord's work times a trillion. And I'm really grateful for their example. And that's awesome that you won the show and that you were able to bolster their efforts that way.
Yeah.
What's the pressure of being the project manager, really?
Well, understanding that if you don't win, there's this guy with this crazy blonde hair that's going to go, John Rich, you're a good person, but John Rich, you're fired. Okay. Good people. you're fired. I don't want to get fired. I want to win. So the whole time you're seeing all this crazy stuff. First of all, Mark Burnett, right? Probably the most famous ever creator of reality television, created Survivor, Shark Tank. I mean, Mark Burnett, incredible guy. Man, they torture you in those shows. And by that, I mean, they don't let you eat for 8, 10, 12 hours sometimes. They'll say, hey, guys, get your breakfast orders in. You go, oh, I want scrambled eggs and sausage and blah, blah, blah. And then you go, where's breakfast? You go, oh, breakfast got hung up in traffic. We'll have lunch for you waiting at the next spot. Everybody get into this van. And then you go over there, and then they go, oh, you know what? Something just came up, dinner. And this went on for a couple of days, and I'm seeing people start to lose it, man. So I'm like, okay, I see what they're doing. That's why people going crazy on this show. So there was a Whole Foods grocery store right across from Columbus Circle where Trump Hotel is at. And after a long day of shooting, I took my briefcase over there and bought power bars and like juice and all the, calories, just loaded it full of calories. And so I started carrying my briefcase everywhere I was going. And when they all start freaking out because they had no food, I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I feel fine. I would unscrew my microphone, go in a bathroom stall and eat 2 power bars and suck down some Gatorade and walk back out and be fine. It was a challenge, man, on camera from 6 a.m. till 11 p.m. every single day. So
nope, no way.
But me and Lil Jon became true friends. I've gone on to do big charity events for him. He's come to my house and done stuff with me. I made friendships that I still have. Meatloaf's another one. Me and Lil Jon, though, that I thought that was such a great example to show, a black rapper and a white guy in a cowboy hat who are absolutely locked on every single thing we're trying to accomplish on this show as dads, as people. 2 totally different guys from different worlds for the most part, but all these things we had in common and still do. And we disagree on all kinds of stuff. But if Lil Jon called me and said, man, I need you to help me, I'd be like that. Same thing for me. And so that was a really incredibly powerful thing that I think played out on that show, was for people to see such opposites like us work together so closely.
I love it. We'll have to have you back again sometime, brother. There's so much more I want to touch on, but I've kept you forever. I'm so grateful for your time and an amazing story. Like, what a great story of really reinventing yourself and being vulnerable enough to learn your shortcomings and be a better man for it. Like, that is awesome. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Absolutely. Glad to. And have me back on. And we didn't even get into Redneck Riviera. We'll have to get into that one next time.
We're going to get into, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about roping. I didn't even get into roping, which I know you're all about it. Yeah, and kind of what's coming. So we'll do it again real soon. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you. Have an amazing day.
Brother, you too.
As I said to John right there, guys, I think it says so much about a person when they aren't who they want to be and they're vulnerable enough to admit that to themselves. Because if you can't admit that to yourself, then change is basically impossible. And I appreciated his honesty. I was a bit taken aback by it, and I'm grateful for it. It was a great example for me, and I'm sure that you guys got a lot out of hearing what John had to say about his path as well. I certainly hope so. Do me a favor, please subscribe, rate, and review to The Road You Leave Behind. Just go click that subscribe button. It matters so much to us here at outsider.com, at Outsider Media, and it helps our partners know that y'all are listening. Leave us some feedback. I would love to know what you guys think about not only this episode, but the franchise overall. How do we make it better? Who would you like to hear from that we can interview on this podcast? And I want you guys to know, on a personal note, I hear you. Every one of those notes you guys send me, you DM me on Instagram, you send me on Twitter, the emails that are coming in. I'm so grateful for them. Thank you. It matters to me that you're getting something out of this, that you're learning, that you're gleaning inspiration, that you feel passion within the messages. So thank you for listening. We're so grateful here at Outsider. Let us know what you think. Thanks again to John Rich. Really appreciate his perspective and his time. I can't wait to be with you guys again. This is The Road You Leave Behind on Outsider. I'm your host, Marty Smith. Have an amazing day.